you can't find that elusive life partner, that elusive job, countless job applications and still no life partner, we are told we are in a tough market. Tough market for jobs, tough market for spouses. Finding a job you are compatible with and finding a good life partner require work. Pun intended. It usually requires brain work. So, how do we go about it? How do we find a person we are compatible with? Well, let me start off with a story to warm myself up, and since I promised I will have a personal story in this coming episode, I want to share and be vulnerable with you. I am excited to be around people who are creative, who are analytical thinkers, who know several foreign languages, who can talk on any topic, at least to some extent, and even cite some research along the lines. Knowing this about myself, I've always chosen people like this to surround myself with. So straight out of university, I worked in a cancer research center, and then later I worked in a university / government laboratory in the US, and that was also very exciting. Exciting because I need that intellectual stimulation. The scientist in me, whom you see in front of you, needs the intellectual stimulation because there is a whole world inside my brain. There are theories and ideas, and they need an answering brain that would hear those and that would act as a sounding board and that would basically motivate me and criticize me and so on. So how does it feel to work in organizations which have a very high virtual IQ? I worked at UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, and somebody told me after I stopped working there several years later that people, I think staff or students at UC Berkeley, have some of the highest average IQ. I don't know, I didn't check it. But I definitely noticed that there are plenty of Nobel laureates around giving speeches and workshops and so on. And it was very exciting and very stimulating. Overall, working in academia and in research laboratories, pure research and development, feels like dating an elderly gentleman, at least in terms of the intellectual stimulation and medical benefits, but not the salary. No reference to sugar daddies here. That's a completely different type of tea. Definitely not mine. I do not believe in discriminating one aspect of life above all others. Just looking at the net worth of a person financially and choosing them for that seems unfair to the person they are, to their emotional and cognitive richness, right? Okay, totally derailed into the socioeconomic aspect of our lives. That's for a different episode. Getting back to the cognitive aspect of our lives, or brains, and knowledge. Knowledge can be measured. At least companies think so. Do you have a university diploma? What university? Ivy League? What diploma? Bachelor's, master's, PhD? Obviously, while being hired, you're prodded with tests. Knowledge of English, French, Hindi, if you need any of those languages at work. Technical skills tests, IQ tests. We usually don't poke our soulmates or potential soulmates with the same tests. However, we want to be somewhat compatible with our soulmates' brains, for dinner conversation. Now, what does research tell us about it? Mice tend to marry spouses with IQs that are generally close to their own. Dear mice, obviously for that dinner conversation. Research also tells us that a high IQ predisposes toward a happy marriage. Now, what about companies? Companies also have IQs. Besides the IQs, the average IQs of their employees, they have their own virtual IQ, the intellectual property and the research the company generates on a yearly basis. It is called business intelligence quotient or organizational IQ. And it's made of two main ingredients, the knowledge and the learning that the company accumulates along its lifetime, how it improves its processes, how creative it is or becomes, how much of an edge in the market it has, and so on. Now, as an aside, if you are a smarty mouse of above average intelligence, well, you might as well become your own owner, your own company, pay your own way, follow your own instructions, create them yourself, fail, and get up again with the knowledge that you followed your own instructions. And this is the perfect seg into the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Basically, as I told you earlier, I am excited by knowledge and creativity and ideas and analytical thinking and a flexible mind. Basically, a good meadow of trees or neurons, a garden of ideas of healthy trees growing versus a garden of dried up twigs. Leaves sprouting on neurons, the tree trunks, aka the neurons, dendrites and axons thickening, the branches thickening, trees giving off seeds, other saplings grow around it, aka new neurons develop from an embryonic state, just so that you know there are neurons that are developing from baby neurons into full adult neurons in our brains. It just doesn't happen very often, but yes, it does, especially in the hypothalamus. Birds, aka ideas, nesting in our brains. Anyway, I think I got carried away a bit with the gardening and anatomy analogy, but you get the gist of it. We want a fluffy, flexible brain versus dried up twigs, fixed and locked, set in concrete. And we usually want this both personally in our personal relationships with friends and especially with a potential spouse, and in professional relationships. And companies obviously want the same. What I just described, this garden of ideas and creativity, is the exact opposite of the typical signs of low intelligence, which are lack of curiosity, closed-mindedness, lack of critical thinking skills, black and white thinking, poor decision-making abilities. Who wants an employee like that or a spouse like that who cannot take decisions? Unlikelihood of changing opinions, being rigid and set in concrete. I mean, who wants a company whose opinions are set in concrete? That reminds me actually of a video I made recently about a company called Granite Rock, which, despite trading and selling concrete, did not have its mindset set in concrete. Check it out. Goals to Results is the name of the video. I'll link it down below. So when we don't have our minds set out in concrete as a company, let's say, then our data can dance, and this is where business analysts come into play. And they can analyze this data and they can take much better decisions and implement much better strategies based on the current performance of the company and its current KPIs. Another typical sign of low intelligence, lack of intellectual humility. I mean, who wants to be with somebody who is a know-it-all and who in reality has a very, very narrow knowledge spectrum? It's pénible, as the French would say. It's painful, both in a professional setting and in a personal setting. Another sign of low intelligence is diminished ability to reflect, lack of creativity, short-term thinking, and unrealistic thinking. Why am I listing these? Well, because I'd like to give you some examples of companies that do the exact opposite of this. For example, companies that foster an innovative culture, that are not afraid of seeking novelty. They encourage a workplace environment where there is plenty of experimentation, and these are companies like Google and 3M, which I mentioned again in that previous video, Goals to Results. They also leverage data analytics, as I just mentioned previously, and they adjust their strategies for selling, and for a good shopping experience like Amazon does. Then they also are not afraid to be flexible and to collaborate, to create partnerships with universities and research laboratories. Another sign of a high organizational IQ for a company would be to have good feedback loops with the customers. So basically ask the customers, what do they think about these products and how can we improve, and engage the customers in the innovation of the company. And Lego is a good example. Then another sign of, let's say, high intelligence in a company would be to be on trend with the growing demands of the market. And right now it's the eco-friendly products that are in demand. So Tesla's electric vehicles and solar products are reshaping those industries right now. Overall, you can see that the organizational IQ is a lot more than just the knowledge this company, any particular company, generates. It's the learning and the capacity to refine its processes and its creativity to match the current demands of the market. So if you are a creative thinker, that is, you like brain acrobatics, you are excited about ideas that blow your mind, and you like to brainstorm, you're probably a good match for one of these companies with a high organizational IQ. It turns out that not only professionally you might be a good match, but personally as well. Statistics say that 70% of people find their spouse in the workplace. And that's not surprising, right? Because they're probably a good match cognitively. The cognitive aspect of their lives, their brains match, their brains' landscapes match pretty well. Aside from the fact that they probably have a similar background, similar education, and so on. So they have a similar socioeconomic status, which helps as well. So, in conclusion, there are organizations which work on curing cancer or stopping pollution, and then there are companies that produce lipstick or bread. Obviously, the amount of research, innovation, and creative ideas are substantially different among these two types of companies. Their virtual IQ is very different. However, I do not want to diminish the value of bread in our lives. I apologize to the gluten-free community of mice. If you can find your cognitive food outside the scope of your work, outside the bread manufacturing facility, that's all good. Bread is just as important as knowledge after all. And since we're on the topic of bread and knowledge, I want to finish with this, a saying that's often on my mind. Simple living, high thinking.